Hello, and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the podcast. This week, I am joined by the wonderful Iain Sainsbury. Now, many of you may know Iain. He has been on the podcast before, and he's a bit of a legend in our community in the Facebook groups. He's done a couple of the diplomas, the Fine Diploma and the Advanced Diploma, and he set up his own incredible jewelry business where he's making gorgeous collections, which you'll hear a bit more about as well today. But I got Iain to come along for a couple of reasons. One, because he took one of the masterclasses last term, and this is our first time ever doing these new masterclasses, which are advanced stone setting techniques. Last term's one was with Anelia Caprina, who is an incredible jeweler, amazing skills, mad skills. And that was the decorative Collette's class. So we'll share a bit about that and Iain's experience, but also Iain is going to be taking on the role of moderator for the masterclasses, which means he is going to be inside the Facebook group and supporting students coming through. And we have very excitingly coming up in a couple of weeks the next masterclass, which is Fishtail setting with Scott McIntyre. So lots of exciting things ahead, and particularly anyone listening who's thinking, I'd like to have a go at some of these advanced stone settings. I'll put the link in the bio, check it out. Now is a great time to sign up because we're going to get started in a couple of weeks' time. So you've got to get your tools and materials ready, schedule some time, get ready to go. So Iain, before we get into all of that, just for anyone who hasn't met you yet, do you want to just share a little bit about yourself and your jewelry business?
Yeah, so I'm Iain Sainsbury. I have a business now which I renamed at the beginning of the year to Iain Sainsbury Fine Jewellery. Basically, I have a very unconventional route into jewellery. I spent many years working in industry. In fact, Jess and I did a little film about it last year. And I ended up doing jewellery making mainly because I burnt out in my previous career, and it was just I found it when I was recovering, and it's it's amazing how life can take you places you never thought you'd go. And so doing something creative is something I'd never thought was really my thing. And the opportunity that I've had over the past 2-3 years, learning from the various people within Jewelers Academy, learning new skills has been amazing. And it's one of those things that it's the way things are taught. It certainly works to my brain, and it's one of those things that I think if I hadn't had that kind of resource then and there, I think I would have struggled a bit. But actually, having had it, it's made things possible. I've advanced my business, and I mean the area I now have a sort of I'm developing gradually my own personal signature style, and it's fun to be able to add bits to it. And I think that's probably why I find the masterclass interesting, personally, because you can add elements to something that you already do. But yeah, I mean that's me. Uh, I'm very happy to be here.
Yes. And tell us just a little bit again before we get into the masterclass about your signature style, because I do see it evolving. And I know that you're applying for an award and all sorts of things. So just tell us a bit about your making at the moment, because you do a lot of stone setting, don't you, in your work?
I do. I mean, if you read my sort of the various things I say about it, it's a case of the main features are really sand casting and stone setting. So I love sand casting. It's very different from lost wax casting, where you send a wax model away and somebody else makes it for you. Everything I do myself. So I've got a casting area in my workshop. I use a lot of beach sand. Doesn't have to be beach sand. I've cast with all sorts of things, but I use beach sand and it adds texture. I know there are other people who do this technique as well around the world. Not a huge number of us, but it's everybody has a slightly different way of doing it and a different take on how they do it. And the way I love doing casting and using it is to have those very rough textures you get with sand, and then make very fine surfaces or add fine settings. So a recent piece that I finished off, and actually it's one that's been submitted for the awards, is part of one of my collections, the Atomium collection. And for the first time, what I did was not just doing a stone setting on the top using collets and gold wire, but actually setting diamonds into the beach sandcast setting. So when you look at it, unless you look under a microscope, you can't actually tell how they're set,
Mhm.
because the beads that I've used match the sand casting around them. So it's one of those fun things. You can see it on a very high magnification photo, but you can't see it in real life,
So
even
the
with a.
diamonds are secretly there sparkling away.
Oh, they are, and when you turn it in light, it's just amazing. Yeah, I love using stones. I love using stones in the work, mainly because they accentuate, but you can always use them to sort of highlight different things. I mean, in the piece I submitted to Tommy and Ring 8, it's the colours I chose either reflect the sort of the garden that's around the atomium structure, which is designed off, or the sort of the sky, because a lot of photographs there's lots of reflections. So I use the stones to highlight reflections, and there's sort of a purpley light they use illuminating it at night, and that's where sort of the purpley tanzanite comes in, and the spinels. So yeah, I love using colours in the stones to reflect colours that I see in what I'm being inspired by.
I love that. Yeah, and it really brings the piece to life. So anyone who hasn't checked Ian out already, do go follow him on Instagram and have a look at some of his pieces, because you show your work in progress as well, which I always think is really nice. Like bits and pieces as they come along. So the masterclass. So we've had the first one. There are, for anyone who doesn't know about them, there are 3 masterclasses a year, and they just kind of keep going. So you can join at any point. You can come in, well, not at any point, but any of the 3 terms. So some people joined in the first term, which was sort of September, October time, and that was the decorative collates with Anelia. So how did you get on with this project, Ian? It's a very challenging one. So they are really master classes. They're not easy classes, are they?
No, no. I mean, for those who don't know, I did the fine and the advanced diplomas beforehand, and then Elliot teaches on those as well. And there's an understanding you have a certain level of capability before you go in to do these. You need to know how to set stuff in bezels. You need to know roughly how to set things. I'm guessing for Scots, I haven't seen the videos yet, but at least be able to do things like castle setting and things like that, just so that you've got an understanding of how beads work. But certainly for last term, with an Elias, it was an interesting challenge, because it's one part of sort of making collets and setting that I've never done before. Um, so cutting through underneath where I'd set, and I suppose part of it was I had no experience doing it, and no one had shown me how to do it. Um, and I'd love to say I managed to achieve all 3 of the projects that she did. I had to go at all 3. There's 2 of them are still work in progress. One of them I did use though, and that's the second project she did, which was making a
The
like a,
dome, was it?
yeah, it's a domed collet for a stone. And
Mhm.
actually, I have it was my youngest birthday, and I used that to create a dome setting for a topaz pendant I gave her. And that one's really fun, because that's it's not just marking something out on a flat sheet; it's marking something out on a curved surface, which is it just blows your mind. You can't get your head around how exactly you do it until you try doing it. But it's wonderfully explained. Anelia is very good at what she does. She makes it look easy. Um, and the funny thing is that just doing that one and trying the other 2 um, gave me the confidence to then do other things. So when I've been doing earrings, I've never cut out galleries in earrings before. So whenever I've done them, they've just been like flat tube settings, or maybe just a claw setting. But this time I actually made some for my wife for a birthday present. And this time I used what I'd learned using at Nelia's course to actually do that for a pair of earrings I made for her. So
Mhm.
it is one of those things that it's not just the techniques you learn, but it's the confidence it gives you to do other things with it as well. And I think that's the great advantage to them. But what is taught is it is tricky, it is challenging, but it's good fun.
Yeah, yeah. I loved, I mean, obviously I watched when we were filming, and I just loved seeing Nelia work, and I was very inspired when I was seeing the projects that she was making, because I think she has this way of making you feel like something that you look at first and think that's impossible, and then she just does it and you're like, it is possible. And then, and like you said, when it's new the first time, you're going to make mistakes, there's going to be kind of imperfections, but the skill in terms of piercing and learning how to pierce on a curve with a little setting, with solder joints and all those kind of things. And then obviously the actual setting of the stone at the end as well. I think one really nice thing is you learn the mount making and the stone setting. Often they're
Mm.
taught kind of separately, which I always think I understand why, because traditionally you had a mount maker and a stone setter. But when we're running our own businesses, we are everything, unless you're sending it off for a stone setter. But this is, for people who want to learn the stone setting. So it's quite fascinating to see the whole process. And you had a Facebook group, didn't you? And
Yes.
obviously it was a smaller group of people than the diplomas. But what was it like? What was the community like, and the Zooms and things? Because there's some live sessions as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the one thing that is so helpful, not just for this course, but with all the courses, is that sort of interactivity. Um, Everybody hits different problems. Everybody hits different issues. Some people find different ways of solving them. Um, and it's one of those things that the Facebook group was really useful for just bouncing ideas off. Um, I mean, I've got big hands, and holding on to tiny settings doesn't really help for me. So I worked out how to use just use a piece for my Fordham, so that I could hold on to the bezel and work it out. And that's something that some other people who have the same issue found it useful. And I think that having something like the Facebook group where you can find out that people are having issues or people are doing well and people have tried something that works well, it just gives you that extra level of support, a sort of a peer level of support that is is so useful. I mean, I've met lots of people now from the various different diplomas and the courses I've done from the Jewellers Academy, and it's one of those things that not just having that sort of face to face interaction on calls, but also on the Facebook, you get to know people a lot better. The calls themselves are really useful because the experts are open to some stupid questions from all of us. And it's you can they're very tolerant. No, it is wonderful the interaction, and it's useful to sort of have a think about what you want to talk about or ask beforehand because I mean it's their time. But we may be busy. I mean it's a smaller group, but as the sort of the content is harder, the questions sometimes are slightly more challenging. And I think that's something that um, is really good in the fact that you don't have to sort of start from scratch. Everybody has that understanding at this point that of how to do things, and it's really talking about the fine details of how to execute a certain part of whatever you're making. And I found that really useful. I mean, Nelly is great on calls. So Scott, I mean, we've had these people in the diplomas before, and they're all really, really good on calls and happy to take questions and to
Yeah.
talk about how to do things differently or how things could be done better.
Yeah. Because every question feels silly when you ask it, doesn't
Oh
it?
yeah,
Because I should know this, especially at advanced level. I feel like it's harder. When you're a beginner, it's like, well, of course, you're not going to know anything. But when you've been making jewelry for 3, 5, 10 years, sometimes it's harder to say, actually, this thing, which I think is quite basic, I don't understand. Can you explain? But it might just be a little gap in your knowledge, or sometimes when we're learning, we're so overwhelmed with new information that we forget some of the basics. And, even just like, how do I hold this? Like, I've never held this before.
exactly. I mean, a great. I mean, the reason why I thought that Anelia's course was brilliant was because of the piercing. So I skipped the silver diploma, and I know that piercing is a big part of Chelsea. And it's something that I had sort of no formal training in that part at all beforehand, and I learnt as I went along and making jewelry, and you get better just through experience. But when it's piercing stuff that isn't flat, that is curved, it's really hard if you don't have somebody you can say, "Hang on, how exactly do you do that?" Because that's something I've never really learnt, and I think it is that even basic skills sometimes we forget or we haven't, as you say, there may be a gap in the knowledge, and it's that sort of interactivity that helps pick up those bits, and you find a solution to them. So
Mhm.
yeah, they're excellent courses.
Yeah, and I think something that I've learned doing some sort of more advanced stuff like that is using the saw not just as a saw but like a file to just,
Yeah.
when you sawed it already and then there's this tiny like bit of a millimeter and it's like, oh, how am I going to get that? Or how to clean up little intricate pieces that are, like you said, pierced and on a dome, and you need it to be strong because you're going to set it. So I think one of the things that I really like about the masterclasses is how they combine so many different techniques. So
Mm.
technically speaking, piercing, not the hardest thing in the world. Stone setting, not the hardest thing in the world. Creating a structure, not the hardest thing. But when we put them all together and then we make it tiny, which is what we
Yes.
do with jewelry, it's like, okay, that's what order do I do this in? How do I, stop stop it from squashing or whatever it is that could happen. So yeah, and it was lovely to see because obviously I was constantly stalking the Facebook groups, how you guys were getting on, and because it's the first time that people have done this with us, so
Mm.
that was really nice. So the next masterclass, which you don't know as much about yet because you've not seen it and I've seen it, but we can talk about a bit, is the fishtail setting. Have you ever done anything like this, Iain? How are you feeling about approaching
So
fishtail setting?
I've done it once. In fact, I did it for my final project for the advanced diploma. I did it on the pendant I made, and that was, I had Scott's book actually. I bought Scott's book, and I read how to do it from that. But it's going to be interesting to see it taught because I haven't been taught how to do it so visually. I've read about it, and I sort of made a best effort at it. And I'm looking because since I did that, I bought it with a microscope, and going back and looking at it, I'm like, could improve seriously in certain areas. And it's interesting because that's one of the things that I think really helps having tutors like Nelio, Scott, etc. there, because you can sort of say, hang on, how do I improve that? How do I get better on that bit? And that's what I'm looking forward to. So yeah, I mean, I've tried it once to some degree of success. I'm not sure it's perfect.
Awesome.
Looking
Yeah,
forward
no,
to it.
it's such a nice setting though, and I think, like for me, this is probably the one that feels most comfortable out of the three. But we all have different. I just love drilling holes. Like I could just sit. It's just so satisfying. Drilling holes all day makes me happy. Um, such a cool person. But no, it's really nice, and I think a lot of it is to do with the hand control and like holding the pendant motor and accuracy and detail. So I think fishtail setting's really nice for people who have slight OCD as well, because it's, like pave or any micro stone setting is like the satisfaction of getting everything in order. And yeah, it's just very satisfying. I still have not mastered the actual detailing of the fishtail at the end, but that's what practice is for. So working with gravers quite a bit and exploring. And the nice thing is as well, like I love you've kind of invested in a microscope and taking it further, which is awesome. But when you watch Scott and Anelia and April, they all work just without any of the fancy tools, like they just, because they've done this for such a long time. And even Scott, it's amazing. And he doesn't recommend it, and neither do I, but he doesn't even use optimizers. He literally just sets with his bare eyes,
I
which
really
is
know the
yeah. I mean, he says he does it by feel now because he's done it so long that he almost
Mm.
doesn't need to see, he can just feel it. So he's some like master, well, he is literally a master stone setter. But yeah, I'm here for all the magnification. I want to see everything because
Yes,
it definitely helps. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
certainly does. I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. So you're ready for fishtail and you've had a little go. What about, so the third one, which is going to be starting sort of April time with April Dace, who's another incredible jeweler, is the tiara band. So a tiara band is like sort of a band that would fit around an engagement ring and has 3 to 5 stones usually. It could have more, and it's like a kind of tiara. Have you ever done anything like this?
Nope. No, that's the one I've done. When I looked at them, I was like, I've never ever tried that. Um, I do a variety of different things in my own work at various different times, but that's something I haven't done yet. I keep looking at it, going, I must give that a go, but I might wait.
Yes, yeah, I would wait. It's a very, very detailed course. In fact, it's so detailed that we had April down for filming and we ran out of filming time. We she's coming back because it wasn't enough time to do it all in, because it is such an involved project. But it's amazing because you learn so much from her. And I think the closest thing to it is probably in the advanced diploma Anelia's earrings, because it's
Yes.
like a cluster claw. So it's like that, but maybe shrunk quite a lot, just to excite you ahead of time. Anyone who's done the advanced diploma, we like to challenge ourselves, don't we? We like to try different things. And I think there's something amazing about seeing something that looks impossible and then getting to the point where you're like, it's kind of possible actually. Like
Mhm.
maybe not, I'm not quite there, but I'm getting there. And I love what you said about transferable skills, that it's not just about learning to do these specific projects, but it's just advancing your knowledge. And I think you've advanced so much. Do you recognize that? Do you feel like when you look back from a year, 2, 3 years ago, are
Yeah.
you able to sort of say, I'm way better at this now?
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I look back at some of the stuff I did way back, even when was like term one into the fine diploma, and at the time it was like, this is brilliant. And I look at it now and go, oh, I could have done better there, or maybe a little bit. But the thing is, it's a journey, it's a process. Um, I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't done that. So it's one of those things that you have to walk before you can run, and we all make mistakes. We all sort of improve on things. I mean, it's quite funny because even now, um, so I use things I learned back in the fine diploma with setting a pear shaped stone. I did that last year, and it was, yeah, okay. It was a much more expensive stone and a much finer ring, and it was gold. But it's one of those things that it's taking the skills you've learned and then using them um, in a practical process, I think is one of the absolute key things. And certainly, I mean, I look at what I'm doing even now compared to a year ago. Um, when I started doing when I sort of did the first couple of bits of one of my collections, and I look at what I did then and think, I probably wouldn't do it that way now. I'd do it a different way because of what I've learned since. And it is one of those things that you constantly look at what you've done and think, could it have been better if? But at the time, it was what you did.
Mhm.
And it is that constant evolving. Um, I mean, yeah, I'm a complete tool geek, and I keep buying bits of kit that made me hopefully better than I was. But it's still the basic skills are still you still have to work on them. Um,
Mm.
and it is one of those things of when I was making the piece at the beginning of this year for the competition, um, just going back and starting a piece from scratch again when I haven't actually really made very much for about 3 months because I've been busy with shows and one or two other things. And
Mm.
just going back to the bench and to getting back in, you head back into those skills. Um, it takes a bit of time, but it comes back. But it's one of those things that you realize a lot of it's muscle memory, and a lot of as Scott obviously shows with his setting, a lot of it's muscle memory, and a lot of it is that confidence um, to give things a go and to try and do something different. And I think
Mhm.
that's great. That's the thing I've learned more probably in the last 2 years is that you can do more than you think you can.
Yeah, I love that. And keep trying new things and
Mm.
experimenting. How do you stay motivated? Because like I can imagine some people think, oh, I wish I could do all of that, or I wish I had the motivation to, to to learn all these skills. Do you sometimes wake up and think, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make another tennis bracelet. Or, how do you kind of push through that? Or do you just have that inner drive?
Um, I suppose a lot of it is so sometimes so every now and then I'll have an idea of something I really want to do, and it will just I'll just keep going until I've finished it. I mean, that last ring was a good example of that. I started thinking about that back in the beginning of December, and I didn't actually put pen to paper to do any designs until like the beginning of January, and then I made it in about 3 4 days over a week. But it's for that was easy because it was just like I have to do this, and I must admit the last setting session that took me 7 hours just constantly. Um,
Go
I at the end of it I had to take a break. I
in
just
the
could,
flow. I'm like, I
yeah,
just And I definitely get that as well. Sometimes a design just takes you and you're like, I
Yeah.
can't not do this. It's just happening.
And the funny thing is, though, that sometimes I will wake up and go, "Ah, do I really want to make that?" And the thing I find is that sometimes just the process of making makes a world of difference. So, I mean, for me, when I started all this, part of it was the mental health part, the sort of the fact that it was the creation, it was the making something from scratch. And I think that in some ways that just that physical process helps me. And so I use it in that respect sometimes. And I think that actually in some ways does assist in the motivation. Um, I mean, if I'm completely stuck, and I like everybody. I mean, we all get some mental blocks sometimes. Um, I do something different for a while. I mean, I'll find another outlet on something. Either I'll sketch some designs, or I'll go and I'll take one of the kids to a gallery or something. But I'll do something different. I'll just do something to try and stimulate the brain. And if all else fails, I'll take the dogs for a walk.
That's always a good one, isn't it? Be with the dogs. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is one of those things that we all get those mental blocks. I mean, the thing that's kept me going through course after doing the various courses for me is the fact that I've I've come to this late in life. Well, I say late in life, I'm in my 50s, but it's later than a lot of people. And I found something I can do, and I enjoy doing it. And it's learning new skills. I love that. And it's just I want to do as much as I can now, all the time, because the eyesight's not as good as it was. But it's one of those things that it's that desire to learn more. I think helps a lot. Um, and it's I mean weekly I go to a workshop as well, and I don't get paid for it, but I sort of love going along and just chatting to people and helping them and showing them how to cast things and things like that. So I mean it is one of those things that sometimes it's nice just to give back a little bit as well. I think
Mhm.
that's sort of both sides of it. So a bit of motivation helps.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so you have like a whole package. You kind of got your self-care stuff at home, the family, the dogs, the breaks, but then also doing the online courses, but then also having some in-person stuff. Like it's
Mm.
yeah, and I think sometimes when people do feel stuck, it's maybe questioning like, do you have all these things? Like, are you supported? Because it's really hard to do it all on your own, isn't it? Especially at
Yeah,
this advanced level, I think, because when the problems come, it can be quite a lot. And it's like, oh, I need to try again. And sometimes there's a piece you spend 8 hours on and it goes wrong.
yeah.
And that's like, oh, okay.
I mean, I hit exactly that a couple of weeks ago when I was a momentary lapse of concentration. I was resoldering a setting, and I just caught the torch on the on the shank for like 2 seconds too long, and just went. It's like, oh,
Oh.
and I had to then basically completely take the thing to pieces and start again. But it's sort of, I think you hit on a point there, which is around the it isn't it we what we do is inherently an individual thing, because it's hard for somebody else to do what we're doing at that moment in time. And so you do tend to get quite insular with it. And I think one of the things that I've found, and certainly it's probably helped I've had that progress through the various different diplomas and the going into the advanced, is that I know a lot of the people now within the groups who are at the same sort of level. And we do interact. And so on Facebook, you do interact with people. And it's not just sort of like a static group. It's you come along with sort of I'm stuck doing this, or I've just done this. What do I do now? Um, and I think that, along with talking to people, helps. And I think that that's something that it's especially if you're like me, you work on your own in your own studio. Um, 90% of my time, it's how do you get out of your sort of little bubble and talk to other people. And sometimes that's quite hard to do doing this. I mean, a lot of people I know have this like as a background, um, second career they've got planned but they haven't done yet. Um, and so they do have that degree of interaction with people elsewhere. But I think when you're actually involved in the jewelry side of things, it's so helpful to try and have some interaction, whether it's an in-person workshop or a community space that you use, um, or just sort of doing one of sort of getting onto the Facebook group, chatting to people, or going on one of the calls. It does help a lot.
Mm.
I think that's important because it's too easy just to to sit in your own little bubble and sometimes completely forget there's the rest of the world out there.
Yeah, yeah, which is part of the fun as well.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it's funny. I read a report card the other day. I was looking through like old report cards, and I don't know if you had this at all. If any of you or anyone listening ever sort of like read old things, and I must have been like 6 or 7, which is a similar age to my son now. And it said as like the main kind of summary of the year, like Jessie likes to sit on her own making things in the workshop. I just had to laugh because I was like, oh, okay, I guess there were signs. But it's just quite funny how it's what we enjoy, but we also need the connection at the same time because, yeah, when there are challenges and because we're humans still. And that's one of the reasons why we do the masterclasses like this in a cohort style learning. Like we could just say, here they are, go get them anytime.
Mm.
But I need to be alone with all of those settings, which is a lot. So learning with the tutors and learning with other students, I think, is so important. And you're going to be, just to wrap up, you're going to be in the Facebook group, so people are going to come and get to chat to you. It's exciting.
Come and ask me questions. Happy to answer them.
Yeah, yeah. And Ian's very good on Facebook. So, it's always nice to have someone who's there and present and available to come and help and sharing the journey along the way. So, Iain, anyone listening who wants to find out more about you, where is the best place they can come connect with you?
With me, the best place is Instagram, even though that they've mucked everything up with their recent upgrade. All my pictures look rubbish. It's I'm sure we'll put the tag in the comments, but it's Iain's IAIN, like my name. Iain's Jewellery. There's an underscore between Iain's and Jewellery, and Jewellery spelt the British way, not the American way.
Yes. Yeah, we'll make sure we put the link in the show notes. Go and say hi to Iain. And we're really looking forward to having those of you that want to join us in the masterclass this term. The link is in the show notes as well. Go ahead and sign up. Get started ordering your tools and materials, and we will get making fishtail settings together very shortly. All right, Iain, thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your knowledge and wisdom with us today. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you on another episode very soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, Jess. Bye.